I was really nervous, so Mel gave me a few puffs of his cigar to try to relax me.
She was the mermaid who made us believe in magic, the android who haunted our dreams. For one glorious decade, she was everywhere, lighting up movie screens with that unforgettable presence. Then, just when Hollywood still wanted her, she started to disappear. This is the rise and fall of Daryl Hannah, the shy girl who found movies. Daryl Christine Hannah was born on December 3, 1960, in Chicago, Illinois, to Susan Jean Metzger, a school teacher who later became a producer, and Donald Christian Hannah, who owned a tugboat and barge company. From the outside, she seemed like any other child. But inside, Daryl was struggling with demons nobody around her could fully understand. She was painfully shy, emotionally isolated, finding it hard to connect with the world. School was difficult. Simple social situations felt overwhelming. While other children played easily together, Daryl felt separated by an invisible wall.
While her father, Donald Christian Hannah, ran a tugboat and barge company. From the outside, Daryl's childhood seemed perfectly ordinary, much like any other child's. But beneath the surface, she was quietly battling struggles that few people around her truly understood. From an early age, Daryl was painfully shy and often felt disconnected from the world around her. Everyday social situations at school could feel overwhelming. While other children easily made friends and played together, Daryl often felt as if she were separated from them by an invisible wall. As a young girl, she was diagnosed with autism, at a time when the condition was barely understood and carried a heavy social stigma. Out of that loneliness and sense of being different, the beginnings of her extraordinary journey into the world of film slowly started to take shape. At a time when autism was barely understood and often surrounded by harsh stigma, the diagnosis cast a long shadow over Daryl's childhood. Not long after, her parents separated, and her life changed again when her mother remarried businessman Gerald Wexler, the brother of renowned cinematographer Haskell Wexler. Growing up in a blended family alongside her siblings Dawn and Paige Hannah, as well as her maternal half-sister Tanya Wexler, Daryl's world was already complex. But the greatest challenge came from the advice doctors gave her parents. Some suggested institutionalizing her and placing her on heavy medication, believing it was the only way forward. Her mother refused to accept that fate for her daughter. Determined to give Daryl a chance to grow in her own way, Susan made a bold decision. She temporarily moved with her to Jamaica, hoping a completely different environment might help her break free from the pressures surrounding her. The change turned out to be more powerful than anyone expected. When they eventually returned to Chicago, Daryl enrolled at the progressive Francis W. Parker School. Yet even there, she still struggled to fully connect with the world around her. It was inside movie theaters that she finally felt at peace. Battling chronic insomnia, Daryl spent countless late nights watching films. The darkness of the theater became a kind of refuge, one place where her shyness disappeared because no one was looking at her. On that glowing screen, she began to understand emotions, relationships, and human behavior in ways real life often made confusing. By the time she reached her teenage years, the path ahead had quietly become clear. Acting was never about fame for her. It was about transformation, the chance to step outside herself and become someone else entirely. In an era when autism was rarely understood and widely misunderstood, the diagnosis placed a heavy burden on young Daryl's life. At the same time, her family was going through its own upheaval. Her parents separated while she was still young, and her mother later married businessman Gerald Wexler, the brother of famous cinematographer Haskell Wexler. Growing up in a blended household with her sisters Dawn and Paige Hannah and her maternal half-sister Tanya Wexler, Daryl's childhood was far from simple. Yet the most frightening moment came when doctors advised her parents to institutionalize her and rely on strong medication, believing it was the only possible solution. But her mother refused to follow that path. Susan believed her daughter deserved a chance to grow without being confined by labels or limitations. In search of a new beginning, she made a courageous decision, taking Daryl away to Jamaica for a time, hoping the unfamiliar surroundings might help her rediscover confidence and freedom. Surprisingly, the change made a difference. When they eventually returned to Chicago, Daryl continued her education at the progressive Francis W. Parker School. Still, even in a supportive environment, she often felt like an outsider, unable to fully bridge the gap between herself and others. Amid that quiet struggle, one place became her escape: the movie theater. Suffering from chronic insomnia, Daryl spent many sleepless nights immersed in films. In the dim glow of the theater, she found a world where her shyness faded away, a place where she could observe without being seen. Movies became more than entertainment. They were a guide to understanding emotions and human connection that often felt confusing in everyday life. By the time she reached her teenage years, a realization had slowly taken shape. Acting was not about chasing fame or attention. It was about stepping into different lives, discovering freedom through transformation, and finally finding a place where she truly belonged. For Daryl, acting offered something she had never truly felt before: freedom. When she stepped into a character, it was like slipping into another life, a place where her shyness and awkwardness could no longer hold her back. Felt like liberation. At just 17 years old, she made a bold move, leaving home for Los Angeles to chase that feeling. She enrolled at the University of Southern California, studying both acting and ballet. The discipline of dance gave her something special, a unique elegance and physical control that would later become one of her most recognizable qualities on screen. Her first step into the film industry came in 1978, when she landed a small role in director Brian De Palma's horror film The Fury. It wasn't a major breakthrough, but it marked the beginning of her journey in Hollywood. A few years later, an opportunity appeared that would quietly change everything. In 1982, director Ridley Scott was preparing a bold and risky project: Blade Runner, a dark and philosophical science fiction film inspired by Philip K. Dick's novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? At the time, the production was seen as an expensive gamble with a complex vision of the future. One of the film's most intriguing roles was Pre, a replicant designed as a pleasure model. Acrobatic, unpredictable, and capable of sudden violence. The character demanded a rare combination of qualities: beauty mixed with danger, innocence hiding something deeply unsettling, a being who felt both human and strangely artificial. When 21-year-old Daryl Hannah walked into the audition, she immediately stood out. Her striking features had an almost otherworldly quality. Her blue-green eyes were impossible to ignore, and her years of ballet training gave her a fluid, almost unnatural grace. In that moment, she was unlike anyone Ridley Scott had seen, and exactly the kind of presence the role seemed to demand. Landing the role would quietly transform the course of Daryl's career in ways no one on the set could have predicted. When production began, the script only briefly mentioned that Pre possessed enhanced gymnastic abilities, but it offered little detail about how those movements should actually look on screen. Instead of waiting for direction, Daryl drew on her years of dance training and natural athletic ability to invent the character's physical style herself. What she created was unforgettable. The eerie cartwheels, the sudden flips, and the unsettling way Pre moved, almost like a damaged doll coming to life, gave the character a strange, hypnotic energy. Every motion balanced elegance with danger, beauty with something deeply unsettling. These distinctive movements weren't choreographed in advance. They came directly from Daryl's imagination and instinct as a performer. Director Ridley Scott quickly realized he had discovered something special. Seeing how powerful those movements were on camera, he began expanding them throughout the film, allowing Pre's physical presence to become one of the character's most striking traits. The production itself was demanding, and Daryl performed many of her own stunts, including the intense fight scenes. Combined with a now iconic look, the pale coat, dramatic dark eye makeup, and her blonde hair styled in a way that felt both futuristic and eerie, the result was a character so visually haunting that audiences would remember her for decades. When Blade Runner premiered in June 1982, the reaction was far from what its creators had hoped for. At the box office, the film struggled, and critics were deeply divided. Many viewers had expected an exciting, action-driven science fiction adventure, but instead they encountered a slow, atmospheric story filled with philosophical questions and a dark vision of the future. Studio interference had also altered Ridley Scott's original vision, adding a voiceover narration and a more optimistic ending that felt at odds with the film's tone. For a time, it seemed as if the movie might quietly fade away. Yet even during that uncertain reception, one thing was impossible to ignore: Daryl Hannah's performance as Pre. The image of her pale figure wrapped in a white coat, the unsettling way she moved, and the intense confrontation with Harrison Ford's character left a powerful mark on audiences. Years later, as the film found a second life through home video and critical re-evaluation, Blade Runner slowly rose to legendary status. What had once puzzled viewers was now praised as visionary filmmaking. As the film's reputation grew, Pre emerged as one of the most memorable figures in science fiction cinema, and Daryl's unique performance became a key part of that legacy. Even today, she often reflects on Blade Runner as the defining high point of her career. But 1982 was not defined by just one role for her. In the same year, she appeared in Summer Lovers, a sensual romantic drama set against the sun-drenched beauty of Greece, telling the story of a young couple whose relationship takes an unexpected turn when a third person enters their lives. The same year proved that Daryl Hannah was capable of far more than one type of role. Audiences had just seen her as the eerie, almost mechanical Pre, but in another film she revealed a completely different side. This time she portrayed a character full of warmth, curiosity, and sensuality, exploring themes of freedom and emotional connection. The contrast was striking. Hollywood began to notice that the tall blonde actress possessed something rare: the ability to transform completely from one role to the next. As Daryl herself once reflected, she never felt traditionally introverted. In her mind, she often existed somewhere else entirely, drifting in a dreamlike world that seemed perfectly suited for the imagination of cinema. Then came the moment that would change everything. In 1984, director Ron Howard, who had already transitioned from child star to respected filmmaker, began working on a romantic comedy with an unusual and risky idea: the story of an ordinary man who falls in love with a mermaid. At first glance, the premise sounded fragile. It could easily have turned into something overly sentimental or unintentionally ridiculous if handled the wrong way. The film needed an actress who could make the unbelievable feel real. Someone mysterious and magical, yet warm and relatable at the same time. The character had to be charming, humorous, and emotionally genuine enough to convince audiences to believe in the impossible. That role ultimately went to Daryl Hannah. Cast as Madison, the enchanting mermaid, she starred opposite Tom Hanks, who at the time was only beginning the journey toward becoming one of Hollywood's most beloved actors. What followed would transform Daryl from a promising performer into a true star. When the cameras started rolling, Daryl Hannah delivered a performance that felt almost magical. But behind that effortless charm was intense preparation. To convincingly portray a mermaid, she trained herself to swim with her legs tightly together, imitating the motion of a real tail moving through water. Interestingly, this wasn't entirely new to her. Since childhood, she had been fascinated by Hans Christian Andersen's classic tale The Little Mermaid, often imagining what it would feel like to move through the ocean the same way. The film's mermaid tail, however, was far from a simple costume. It was fully functional and weighed more than 35 pounds, turning every underwater scene into a serious physical challenge. Despite the difficulty, Daryl performed much of the underwater work herself, spending long periods submerged while filming the swimming sequences. Yet what truly made the character unforgettable wasn't just the physical transformation, it was her performance. She brought a perfect sense of comedic timing, turning Madison's awkward encounters with the human world into moments of genuine charm without ever reducing the character to a joke. Scene after scene highlighted that balance of humor and sincerity. Whether Madison was attempting to eat a lobster shell and all, suddenly appearing naked at the Statue of Liberty after losing her dress in the ocean, struggling to make sense of the fast-paced madness of New York City, or hilariously teaching herself English by watching television inside Bloomingdale's, Daryl infused every moment with warmth and playful innocence. The result was a character audiences didn't just laugh at, they truly cared about. On screen, the connection between Daryl Hannah and Tom Hanks felt surprisingly real. Their scenes carried a natural warmth that made the romance believable, even within such a fantastical story. When Madison finally reveals her true identity as a mermaid, and later chooses to leave the human world behind to return to the ocean with Alan, the emotional weight of the moment lands powerfully. Daryl portrayed the decision with sincerity, making audiences feel that this magical being had genuinely fallen in love, and that walking away from the human world was a sacrifice of enormous magnitude. One small moment in the film would end up creating an unexpected cultural ripple. When Madison is asked her name, she glances at a nearby street sign, Madison Avenue, and simply adopts it. At the time, the joke felt light and playful, perfectly fitting for a character still discovering the human world. But after the film's release, something remarkable happened. The name Madison, which had rarely been used as a girl's first name and was even considered unusual, barricaded herself inside her room. Years afterward, around the premiere of Kill Bill Volume 2, she said Weinstein even used a key to enter her hotel room without permission while she was inside with her makeup artist. Looking back, Daryl came to believe that rejecting his advances may have carried professional consequences. In her view, the powerful producer may have quietly undermined her career afterward, an invisible force that helped push one of Hollywood's former leading stars further to the margins. After Kill Bill, many expected Daryl Hannah's career to surge once again. Instead, the opposite seemed to happen. The offers that followed became fewer and far less significant. Leading roles disappeared, replaced by smaller parts that barely registered in the wider film industry. To her, it began to feel as if an invisible blacklist had formed around her name. But there was another deeply personal factor shaping her relationship with fame, something she had kept hidden from the public for most of her life. In 2013, Daryl finally revealed that she had been diagnosed with autism as a child. For decades, she had kept this part of her life private, worried that it might harm her career if it became public knowledge. The condition contributed to an intense shyness that made many aspects of celebrity life extremely difficult. Red carpets, television interviews, and talk shows, events that most actors treat as part of the job, felt overwhelming to her. As she later explained in an interview with People magazine, she had never felt comfortable being the center of attention. Acting itself had always been different. Performing allowed her to step outside herself and inhabit someone else's identity, something that brought her genuine joy. But the constant spotlight that came with fame was never something she truly desired. On top of that, Daryl held firm personal principles that sometimes clashed with Hollywood's expectations. A lifelong vegetarian and passionate environmental activist, she insisted on eco-conscious production practices and refused to participate in projects connected to environmental damage or human rights concerns. While those convictions were admirable, they also made her a less flexible choice in an industry that often rewards compromise. As Hollywood gradually moved forward without her, Daryl began to look for meaning and purpose beyond the traditional path of movie stardom. As Hollywood gradually faded from the center of her life, Daryl Hannah redirected her energy toward something she had always cared deeply about: environmental activism. What had once been a personal passion soon became the main focus of her work. Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, she used her voice to promote sustainable living, even launching a platform called DH Love Life, where she shared ideas and information about eco-friendly lifestyles. She also became a visible presence in climate activism, marching in protests against the Keystone XL pipeline, speaking at the United Nations Climate Summit, and attending environmental conferences around the world. In 2012, She further committed to the cause by serving as executive producer of the documentary Greedy Lying Bastards, a film examining the forces behind climate change denial. Her activism wasn't simply symbolic. It often placed her directly on the front lines. Over the years, she was arrested several times during environmental protests, including a notable demonstration in 2013 where she stood alongside Robert F. Kennedy Jr. She also became involved with several environmental organizations, serving on advisory boards and helping establish the Sustainable Biodiesel Alliance. Unlike many celebrities who advocate from a distance, Daryl tried to live the values she promoted. She chose to live largely off the grid in Malibu, in a solar-powered home, and drove a vehicle fueled by biodiesel. For her, sustainability was not a slogan but a daily commitment, even if it earned her a reputation as difficult within an industry that often preferred conformity. Around this same time, her personal life once again attracted headlines. In 2014, Daryl began a relationship with legendary musician Neil Young. The timing sparked controversy, as Young had recently filed for divorce from his wife of 36 years. Some voices within the music world reacted harshly, most notably David Crosby, a former bandmate of Young's, who publicly criticized Daryl before later apologizing for his remarks. Despite the noise surrounding them, the couple paid little attention to the criticism, choosing instead to focus on their relationship and shared passions. Their connection grew from more than romance. It was built on shared passions. Both Daryl Hannah and Neil Young had long been devoted to environmental activism and creative expression, and those common values brought them closer together. In 2018, the couple quietly married in an intimate ceremony aboard Young's boat in the San Juan Islands. About 100 close friends attended the celebration, including legendary musicians Joni Mitchell and Stephen Stills. Under the glow of a nearly full moon, Neil Young reportedly sang Harvest Moon to his bride. Guests were asked to leave their phones and cameras behind, ensuring the night remained private, personal, and free from the usual glare of publicity. After their wedding, the couple settled into a quieter life in Ontario, Canada, choosing a peaceful property far removed from the noise and pressure of Los Angeles. During this period, Daryl also began exploring filmmaking from behind the camera. She directed several projects connected to Neil's music and creative world, including the experimental film Paradox in 2018 and the documentary-style Project Barn in 2021. Although she still occasionally appears on screen, such as her role in the Netflix series Sense8 in 2015, it's clear that her priorities have shifted away from chasing Hollywood stardom. In 2019, Daryl Hannah finally received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, a recognition that arrived decades after the roles that had made her famous. Looking back on her career invites a sense of reflection, and perhaps a few lingering questions. What might have happened if powerful figures in the industry hadn't been able to quietly derail careers? What if Hollywood embraced aging actresses with the same enthusiasm it often grants aging actors? And what if someone like Daryl, who never felt comfortable in the spotlight to begin with, hadn't been forced to battle her own nature while living inside it? But perhaps those lingering questions missed the real story. Daryl Hannah didn't simply fade away because she failed. She chose a different path. At a time when many actors cling tightly to fame, she gradually stepped away from the spotlight to pursue what mattered more to her. Instead of chasing the next big role, she prioritized her beliefs, her activism, and a quieter life far from Hollywood's relentless pace. She traded red carpets and studio expectations for a peaceful existence in Canada, sharing her life with a man she loves and dedicating her energy to causes she truly cares about. Over the years, Daryl has spoken openly about how difficult it was to navigate an industry that often rewards conformity and constant visibility. For someone naturally private and deeply principled, Hollywood was never an easy fit. Yet she has never expressed regret about the choices she made. In fact, she has often emphasized that fulfillment comes from living honestly rather than seeking constant approval. In a 2007 interview with The Telegraph, She reflected on her life with quiet confidence, explaining that she felt deeply satisfied with the path she had taken and with the work she continued to do. And now in her 60s, Daryl Hannah appears to have found the balance she was always searching for. She continues to create, to speak out for environmental causes, and to live according to her own values rather than the expectations of the industry that once defined her. In many ways, her story offers a different definition of success. Staying famous forever isn't the only victory. Sometimes the real triumph is recognizing when to step away, choosing a life that feels authentic instead of chasing applause. Hollywood may no longer revolve around Daryl Hannah the movie star, but Daryl Hannah the person has built a life that truly belongs to her. The mermaid who captured our hearts in 1984 didn't disappear. She simply swam to deeper, quieter waters where the glare of fame couldn't reach her, where she could finally be herself. If you enjoyed learning about Daryl Hannah's incredible journey, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories about the stars who shaped our memories. Until next time, keep the memories.